always want to remind people of that because it's one of the reasons why we're growing so fast and why our economy is thriving is because we have that excellent workforce. And then, finally, you got the convergence of rural West Tennessee. So you think about historic downtown Memphis, rural West Tennessee, and the world's largest inland Navy base. It's a place like no other.
Welcome to The Talk Chamber, a production of the Greater Memphis Chamber. The Talk Chamber is the podcast for the latest on the Chamber, economic development, and all things Memphis. This mic is powered by ORTHOSOUTH, world-class orthopedic care across the Mid-South. Today's episode features Frankie Dakin, the city manager of Millington. Frankie, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me. This is such a great setup.
Thank you. I'm really excited to have you on and to just talk about several different things. But before we dive into that, could you tell us about yourself and your role?
Yeah.
City manager, what does that mean? What do you do?
Yeah, well, I'll start with kind of where I am now, and if you're curious, kind of how I got into local government, I'm happy to talk about that. So, Frankie Dakin serves as a city manager for the city of Millington, Tennessee. We're the fastest growing city in Tennessee's largest county, right here in Shelby County. We're home to the world's largest inland Navy base, a community that has over 100-year legacy, serving and hosting the United States military right here in our region. And so my role as city manager is not much different than being a chief administrative officer, a CEO of a company. And so I just oversee a city with about an $85 million budget. About $40 to $45 million is used for educational expenses. And so very complicated operation. We've got a police department, fire department, water department, public works division, planning, economic development, and all the rest. And like a CEO, I report to a board of directors, except my board of directors is the board of aldermen who are publicly elected. And so therefore our shareholders are the people. And so it's a very interesting job. I love public service and kind of got into this at a young age.
Just as in this position, how would you describe Millington to somebody who's maybe only seen it on a map or driven past it a few times, maybe gone there for a sports game in high school and then never explored the city, doesn't really know anything about it?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a very special place. I grew up in Millington. I was a first-generation college student. I went to Rhodes College afterwards. And I think everybody kind of always feels like their hometown is special. But Millington is particularly special because of our location and proximity to world-famous downtown Memphis, which we're so proud of. I mean, it's a cultural asset that's mentioned in more songs than any other city in the world.
Very true.
That's very special, and I like to talk about how Millington is often closer to downtown Memphis than East Memphis is, and I think a lot of people don't realize that. And then you have the world's largest inland Navy base, Naval Activity Mid-South, Naval Support Activity Mid-South, where 6,500 to 7,500 people work on that base, and that's a huge economic driver for our region, for our state. It's one of the largest employers in the state. The city of Millington has had over 100-year legacy of hosting various military installations.
Wow.
And so that 100-year legacy means we're a much more diverse community, home to so many veterans and a really excellent workforce. I mean, when you think about a profile of a veteran, and it's one of our big goals to be the number one place in the country for veterans to retire, these are veterans that are often retiring with 20 years of service to the United States military, the United States Navy primarily. And that's 20 years of the best leadership development in the world. And they're ready for their next chapter in their life. And so I think when we talk about veterans, we often, think about American Legion, VFW, the women and men who served in Vietnam and were certainly chock full of that generation. But we also have folks like Lexi McLean, who's on my staff, public information officer for the city of Millington, who left the Navy and has so much to give and so much experience that is really, really useful. And so I always want to remind people of that because it's one of the reasons why we're growing so fast and why our economy is thriving is because we have that excellent workforce. And then, finally, you got the convergence of rural West Tennessee. So you think about historic downtown Memphis, rural West Tennessee, and the world's largest inland Navy base. It's a place like no other.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say, I think you've kind of already answered it, but what would you say Millington brings to the table for the region? Yeah,
I mean, I think workforce is one. And when you think about economic development, workforce is always the top of the top of the list.
Yes.
And each year, several hundred people retire from that base, ready for their next chapter. several hundred people leave that base and might be going on their last tour in another location, and they can come back and choose to stay here in our greater Memphis region. That is growth that is not zero-sum growth. And so while we're growing really fast, and people often think that it's because of our proximity to Blue Oval or XAI, and those are assets that we're excited about, it's really because folks are staying in Millington that left the base. And that is growth we're not taking folks that might be moving from downtown Memphis, although we do, when, folks maybe our age want to spread their, spread their wings a little bit, have a little bit more land and all the rest. Shelby Forest and Millington's a great place to be. We're not necessarily taking folks from Nashville or Bartlett. These are folks that would otherwise went back to Pensacola or back to San Diego or back to wherever their hometown was. And I think that's really special for the region, and I wish more people knew about it.
Well, like you mentioned, it just brings a special level of diversity and in thought, in life experience.
Absolutely.
People from all over the country ending up in one spot and choosing to stay there.
Absolutely. And so, I had dinner last night with two veterans. One was a mechanic in the Army, and he had a job that sounded mechanic-y to me. He was telling me about it. I was like, are you using skills you used from the military? He said, no, not at all, but I used my GI Bill, and I became an engineer.
Oh.
And now he works in a major company here in Memphis. The second is still in the United States Navy and has a really, really important role as a congressional liaison. And so those are skill sets as he thinks about his next chapter. I'm sure he's going to find a great role. He's also a naval aviator. And so, FedEx, look out, and they hire a lot of their pilots. And the person that, I always that comes to mind about the level of talent that we bring to this region is Doug McGowan, Chief Doug McGowan. He was the commanding officer of the base. He retired here, joined public service, and I think he kept on getting more tough jobs. And now he's the president and CEO of MLGW and doing a really amazing job for our region.
Indeed. Yes, certainly. So I want to pivot, but before we get into the big portion of our conversation, I wanted to talk about our Young Professionals Council. Yeah. So for everyone who is listening, for their information, Frankie is one of the founding members of our Sound Check, which then evolved and turned into our Young Professionals Council, which, for your information, has now over 1,000 members.
I'm not surprised. Y'all are killing it. It's awesome. And it makes me feel a little old. I think it was I was going down memory lane. It didn't feel like that long ago. It doesn't feel like that long ago.
Well, and I would say it's still pretty close to what Soundcheck was, and there's a lot of familiarity with it. We've just grown and expanded and added new elements over the years, and we're really proud of our young professionals and seeing what they're accomplishing and just kind of what they're going to do for the region and for our city. So that brings me to my question. How did you get involved with the Young Professionals Group, and how did it benefit you? How would you say it affected you?
Yeah, so I entered public service really early on. And so I ran for alderman of Millington, my hometown, when I was 19, and I got elected at that time and took office when I was 20. And so completely changed my career trajectory at Rhodes. I pivoted to, I was really interested in economics, and so I ended up graduating with a degree in political economy, so political science and economics with a focus on public policy. And so I knew early on that I, because of that experience and serving on the board of aldermen, that I wanted to go into public service and I wanted to go into government and public policy. When I was leaving school, there was not a lot of those jobs out there, for an entry level, public policy person here in our region. And so I started looking for ways that I can expand my skill set. And so one thing I think that government often lacks is the ability to speak the language of business. We certainly don't move at the speed of business unless you're in Millington, too often. And so I wanted to bolster my skills. And so I found Soundcheck, and I found more information about the Greater Memphis Chamber just online. And so that's one thing that's so special about Memphis. I don't have any personal, relationships. My dad was an Army veteran, first generation college student. And I think I just started going to things. Yeah. And ultimately was able to get really more involved in Soundcheck and learn more about our business community and what it means to thrive in the business and commerce, world. It was just a special experience. I mean, I got a chance to spend time, with, really legendary, folks that are still involved today. Like folks like Kevin Woods, Nancy Coffey, the late Phil Trineri, and being able to be in those rooms and have conversations with them. Whereas any other city, really in the country, you'd probably have to wait like 10, 15 years to say a word in those meetings. And so I was able to sit around the boardroom table and learn from those executives. And I ended up learning more about, what I need to focus on my own professional development, in addition to learning about what are the interests of, the business and commerce.
So it's really interesting that you brought up Kevin Woods. I'm pretty sure in the next couple of months he's going to be doing an event with our young professionals group.
Go to it.
Sharing as doing the series we call Corner Office, where we talk with CEOs of companies, and they just get to share their story and answer questions with the young professionals in the room. So I love that you mentioned that, because he still has interest and passion for the young professionals and is still involved. And that's just kind of a testament to me of how the group, even in whatever iteration it is, impacts our community and impacts our young professionals.
I love to hear it. And I think it was called the Corner Office series when we started it. So thanks for reminding me of that. And so it's folks like Kevin Woods that, continually pour into our community and the next generation. So if anybody's listening to this and they're debating on whether to attend one of those Corner Office series, like you need to go. I mean, that's you could have life-changing advice from folks that have really, really done well in their various careers. And somebody like Kevin Woods, he has such diverse experience across public service and in the business world. That's just such a great opportunity. If I can, talk about sound check one more time, because I think I might have missed a really important part, was also the networking among young professionals.
Yes.
I was probably a younger member of that group, kind of fresh out of college, but the folks that I met, I still talk to today, like folks like Anna Cardona and Caleb Park, Trey Carter, who I spent time trying to recruit young professionals in New York City with, and all the rest. Those are folks, Trey has so much experience in the workforce world and economic development. Anna Cardona, same thing. And Caleb Park's a leader in our commercial real estate world. I'm not, and I'm not an expert in those things, but it's nice to have them on speed dial. And those are relationships that I still use to this day. I know if I call one of them, they're going to call me back and talk to me about the item, and I get to, learn from experts that I met through the Young Professional Council. It's
been, for me, even though I work at the Chamber, I still go to those events, and it's been great for me to meet other young professionals who are passionate about our city, interested in growing and furthering their career, whether that's learning something new and about an industry that they don't know, or getting practical day-to-day how to manage the workplace life. It's been a really great experience. And so I think it's really awesome that we've had our young professionals group last so many years and have so many passionate, excited people.
It's awesome. It. I'm so glad y'all are still doing that.
Before we move on, I do want to ask, so I knew that you served in public office. I didn't realize you were 20 years old. You were in college and doing that at the same time. How did you manage that? What prompted you to run for office?
Yeah, I mean, I just started attending meetings. Something happened in my hometown that I was, curious about, and started to attend meetings and realized that, our generation didn't really have a voice, and what they were talking about certainly affected me as I was growing up and affected the hometown where I hoped to return, one day. I was also mentoring students at Bridges at the time, and I was working with a group of high school students that were changing their community through Bridge Builders Change, and I felt a little guilty. I'm like, man, I'm spending time with these young people. They're pouring back into their community, and right to the north, I haven't, I'm not plugged in. And so I started to attend meetings. I was at, Rhodes at the time, and ultimately there was an election coming up, and a few of my friends got together at McDonald's because it was like free Wi-Fi and cheap coffee.
Right.
Of
Naturally.
course, and we started talking about how to get more involved, and ultimately it was like, well, let's just, run for office. Like who can do it, And my friend Stanton Brown, who's at First Horizon, now, he was really involved in sports. Friend Cardell was, further away, and a lot of my friends were off-site at, various UT, and they're like, well, Frankie, you should do it, And so we decided to do it at that time. We pulled the petition against the longest-serving incumbent in that time, and we all basically had a really robust internship experience over the summer, and we knocked on every door in Millington almost twice.
Wow.
And ended up winning that race.
Wow. And would that have made you the youngest person to hold that position?
I think I'm the youngest person to hold the position in Millington, and I was the youngest elected official in the state of Tennessee for a ridiculously long time because I served 2 terms, and we need more younger people to run for office. And so by the time I left, I served 2 terms. So 6 years, I was like 25, 26. And I think there might have been one younger person than me at that time. And that's not good. I think every board of directors, certainly every board that represents the public should have a really diversity of opinions. So do I think we need a board of aldermen full of all 19-year-olds? Probably not. Probably not. You need that diversity of perspective, and youth and young adults. It's so often lacking. We're just not seeing government as a realm that we want to tip our toes in, often for good reason.
Right.
But we need to do better, and our generation needs to get more involved and show up at these meetings. You don't have to run for office. Show up, advocate for an item that's important to you, and you'll quickly learn that it's really easy to change your community for the better if you just start showing up in person.
How does the early investment in your own professional development shape how you think about young professionals in Millington?
Yeah, absolutely. So I spoke about it a little bit, that Memphis is a place where, folks are often reaching back and grabbing the next generation, and it's easier to access, those sort of mentors and everything. And so I had a lot of poor people pour into me, at that time, and I still benefit from the lessons I learned, from what I picked up, and I just kind of soaked up those conversations in the various corner offices. And now I feel a sense of responsibility to do the same for the next generation. And so last year, I think, was probably the first time the city of Millington's had a real internship program. I think, we're a smaller workforce. We've got about 145 employees, and we had about 5 interns and 1 fellow. And so this summer we're now up to 10 interns and 2 fellows.
Wow.
And so our operation grew by quite a bit. And every week I have the opportunity to lead some professional development, or at least help coordinate some professional development for those young people. And I also work with them on an individual basis on projects that they're interested in. It's not just, about pouring into the next generation either, by the way. So if there's anybody that leads an organization that's listening to this, it's really important to bring that next generation into the fold. I learn a lot, and there's a lot that they have to give. So like last summer, we had a few internship projects. One was to activate the oldest commercial building in the city of Millington, the Harrold building, and interns worked on a plan to do just that. And now we've put about $1.5 million into the project, and you can go to savetheharrold.com to learn more about that project and how you can get involved in it. And so that was pretty awesome. We also had an intern who played disc golf, and we have a 400-acre park, Edmund Orgill Park. It's to the north of our town, and it had 2 18-hole disc golf courses on it. I don't play disc golf. I don't play golf either, but he does, and he had some critiques. He said, these disc golf courses don't have maps. They don't have like the par maps, and you don't know where you are. And so I said, oh, great. Well, let's work on it. And so he engaged a community member, and for like $800, we created a map for each of the 18 holes of one of the courses, and he created a new maintenance schedule for our public works department to better maintain that disc golf course. And so $800 and a smart, talented young person in our operation improved a park asset for everybody for years to come.
That's awesome. Those are really cool stories and really cool moments to have young people making an impact
Absolutely. And it can do it in any organization, any
Yeah.
company. I've been in Shelby County government, before. Same thing. We had young people come in and really do remarkable things. At the same time, it's just incumbent on us. We've all had so many people pour into us to spend that time, and that's not without its own benefits. And I found myself, as I think about their professional development this summer, I'm relearning, tools and tricks that I might have forgotten over the last decade or so.
Might not have been as pertinent to you back then as it is to you now.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I try to do the same readings that they have and all the rest, and I can certainly grow and develop every day like they are.
That's awesome, and that's really great. I mean, we are very close, Memphis and Millington, in terms of location and ability, and often share workforce, economic development. We do call ourselves the Greater Memphis Chamber.
Absolutely.
Because we are a regional, we care about the region. We are a 9-county, 3-state chamber. That's our MSA.
Yeah.
So Millington falls under that, which I guess is a good segue into the next part of our conversation. We've got Millington, Memphis, Germantown, Collierville, all sorts of different cities and towns and areas in this region.
Mm-hmm.
They're all different. They all have unique abilities, but they also share a lot in common. What does it take to get all of these regions, areas, municipalities to work together?
Yeah. So, first off, it's just really incredible that we have 8 unique cities, towns, and really economic development engines in one county. And that's remarkable. And I think sometimes we think about that as a negative, that there's these dividing lines, and I just don't see it like that. And so every municipality is, really quite different. I've lived in both Memphis and Millington, and I have friends and family who live in generally every municipality, and I enjoy visiting each of them. And they have their own unique assets. Nobody has a lake like Lakeland. That's a really special asset. And Germantown's awesome as well. Collierville has a beautiful town square, that I really enjoy going to. And so that's really strong. Now, what does it take for us to work together as a region? I think there are a lot of people doing this work and doing it really well. Joanne Massey, CEO of Edge, leads a really, really excellent quarterly joint economic community development board meeting, and we're coming together around sharing ideas and work in regular presentations about organizations that we need to be working with. We just had a really great presentation from the YMCA, on how they've come along, and so that's really important.
Right. And so what would your call to action be for the business community? How could they help contribute to us all getting together?
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard for me to preach at the business community, but if I can, there's all kinds of unlikely stories of success out in this region, and I have to represent Millington, and I think Millington is one that people don't think about a lot. There's some practical reasons for that. We're outside of the loop. And so oftentimes, while we have some really great relationships with our media partners, and you've seen Millington more in the media in the last couple years, it's harder for us to generate kind of news and buzz. And so on our last Board of Aldermen agenda, we approved 2 huge multi-use developments, in Millington. So Astoria Square and Park Field. And so these are developments that took us, probably about 18 months, working on. They're large multi-use developments, lots of commercial opportunities for folks to get involved in. And I don't think anybody knows about it, outside of our community. And it passed with very little fanfare because we have such a really good, robust planning and development staff that has some of the most experience in the region. And really offer white glove service to those that are trying to invest in our community. And so we're trying to do a better job of telling those stories. You can go to Built4It Millington.gov, and that's where we regularly update a development map. We've democratized access to information like our zoning map, and we have a lot of facts and figures around Millington, and we're trying to tell that story. But for the business community, it's so funny when I talk to folks in the C-suite, and I think, I was talking to one that's on your board several weeks ago. I won't name names, and he was not aware that the base still had that much activity. And so he is a leader in this region, very, very informed. And so, by the way, in terms of information, you gotta subscribe to Duncan's email. Duncan's email is awesome, and so that's a good way to read those stories and get involved. Duncan, is doing a really great job, and he's one of those corner office series that I had an opportunity to visit when I was there, and so been so glad to see his leadership here. But you got to look for those, those unlikely stories, and maybe get outside the loop, and, take a dashboard tour of these communities you might not have been to, in a while. Even our friends in Tipton County have a lot of cool things going on, and we got to get out and, hit the streets.
I got one last question for you as we wrap up. You were talking before we started recording about a project that sounded really interesting to me, something new going on. Tell me about it.
Thank you so much, Taylor Ann. I brought it right here for me to remind myself, and I failed. And so thank you for reminding. Millington is bringing the 20th Lone Sailor Monument in the world to our region. And so there's none in our region. I think the closest Lone Sailor Monument is in Baton Rouge. We just beat out Anchorage, Alaska, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Manhattan, New York to land this monument. It'll be a huge draw for Navy, and more important, it's about celebrating our sailors and Marines who have served in the United States Navy, and we're partnering with the Navy League on it. We've had really good investment already from several in the business community. They have a really ambitious goal. They want to raise $500,000 for this project. I think they've raised $125,000. You can learn more about it at the Navy League's website. But we're gonna break ground on that thing regardless. We're gonna get this project done, for our region. It's right at the front porch of our Navy base. And so in our Navy base, there's only two ways in and out. One's on Navy Road, one's on Singleton. And so when our Navy personnel are coming into Millington to spend their tax dollars, here in our region, it'll be one of the first things they see is a monument to sailors and Marines. It's really special. It's in partnership with the U.S. Navy Memorial. Admiral Nowell actually came, and he's the president of the U.S. Navy Memorial, and came and visited us several weeks back. And we gave him a tour, and he shared some sea stories at our VFW and all the rest. Admiral Nowell served at least one tour here in Millington. And so now he's the president of the U.S. Navy Memorial Foundation, where the first Lone Sailor is in D.C. And so we have that relationship already, and it shows just the diaspora of I'm not kidding, probably 1 million people who are alive right now who trained at Millington in one point or in their history. And it's really hard I guarantee you, if we walk around your office afterwards and we ask, if anybody in your office has any Navy connections, I promise you we're going to find several people that said either their parents or their grandparents came here because of the Navy base in Millington. And so this is one way that the business community can still get involved in a really, really meaningful project, bring some tourism, to our historic downtown area, where we also have a renovation of our oldest commercial building, the Harrold building that I spoke about earlier. That's just a hop, skip, and a jump away, and get involved in building what they're calling a quarter deck for our community, a civic plaza for our community, where we'll recognize the U.S. Navy, and it'll be a place for community for decades to come. And so you can go to the Navy League website and learn more about it.
Frankie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and for just investing in the chamber and investing in our region. It takes people like you to make the world go round.
I say the same about you, Taylor Ann. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Talk Chamber. We are so glad you're here with us. Today, Frankie shared with us about the great things going on in Millington, what leadership looks like, and how we can all come together to make a greater Memphis region. If you enjoyed this episode or learned a valuable piece of information, share this episode with a friend, maybe even a colleague. Subscribe to The Talk Chamber to keep up with the latest on the Chamber, economic development, and all things Memphis. Follow us on social media at Memphis Chamber, and we'll see you next time.